This is one of the reasons why I've always been so loud about the fact that the first thing that you have to do to achieve socialism is you have to abolish the bourgeoisie as a class. You have to have a proletarian state. This is what older theorists called a dictatorship of the proletariat, because dictatorship had a different meaning 150 years ago. But basically, a huge number of problems that we face aren't down to like the nitty gritty of economic distribution. It comes down to the fact that the people making all the decisions just have different interests than the vast majority of people. The goal, then, market socialism, is a system in which, say, for the sake of example, you maintain all of the commodification of our economy. People still earn wages from their businesses. They use it to buy their clothing and their food. You know, there's stuff to be worked on here, certainly, but let's focus on one problem at a time. And I think the first problem we should concern ourselves with is who's making those decisions. Because how could we ever trust any kind of big economic shift forward if the decisions behind that shift are being controlled largely by a different economic class? Once the proletariat are in charge, once you have a proletariat state, it's a lot easier to make decisions, I feel, about how to decommodify because you're no longer being controlled by a group of people with a completely different set of interests, you know? How do we destroy the rich without upending our current society? You don't have to destroy anything, and I genuinely mean that. As much fun as it is for people online to talk about guillotines and this, that, the other, in reality, the abolition of the bourgeoisie as a class would be nothing more than a simple package of laws regarding wealth distribution and a mandate for collective ownership of any business one works in. This would be done incrementally. We would probably have a transitory period of several years where businesses of certain sizes would kind of be incrementally and gradually built up to certain levels of mandated democracy. We would have another government institution, much like OSHA, except rather than regulating workplace safety and making sure that everyone's properly securing their ladders, it would regulate workplace democracy, interviewing workers to make sure that everyone in every business feels that, maybe it's not perfect, but they're meeting the bare minimum when it comes to economic democratization. Now, over time, we can increase that threshold, and I think that it will be easy to do so because once you democratize partially, I think that there's kind of like a ball rolling towards full democratization, Like in the same way that unions push into co-ops and how American democracy, when America was founded, which was just rich landowning white men, snowballed into full democracy, except for like felons and children or whatever. I think it would be easy to bring that about. I think that'd be an easy incentive structure to put forward. But anyway, it wouldn't require violence, you know? I also think that capital flight is an overstated problem, you know? Make it so that offices in the United States, businesses, anyone who physically lives here has a mandated level of worker democracy. If they work for some kind of like international fit, where like foreign companies use American workers, you'd have to have special exemptions. Maybe if a certain portion of your worker base is American, you would have to comply with the democratization, or you wouldn't be allowed to have employees from America. But if you only have like one or two contractors, maybe you could have exceptions where maybe those people don't get the democracy. It would be a process. But any change in this direction is good change. And I think you could do all of this without fundamentally disrupting the economy or supply lines, which is important because we want people to have food and penicillin. Has a system like that been implemented yet? There are societies that have had degrees of worker cooperatives. Tito's Yugoslavia. Funnily enough, Mussolini's Italy during a point, though with very different aims than what I'm going for. And also, worker democracies exist today in America, in much of Latin America. There's a thriving culture of them. You can point to them and look for examples and success stories. Mondegrun's a bad example, I believe. What if the government just took the means production for us? The government is beholden to capital interests. They won't do it on their own. Not without a very proletarian government. Apparently, South Korea is a huge farming cooperative. It's only a real cooperative if it's called a worker cooperative. Other kinds of cooperatives are not real. If you hear someone advertising, oh, they're a cooperative, it doesn't matter. If they're a worker cooperative, it matters. Thoughts on the Zapatistas? I respect their aims and their goals, but I feel like the obsession with them that some people demonstrate betrays an unwillingness to engage with the material reality of the American proletarian interest. No one in America, outside of a very small number of very online people, care about the Zapatistas. Even in Mexico, only a small number of people care about the Zapatistas. Probably far more people dislike them than like them for what they represent. I think that while there's many good things they push for and many good things that they stand for, and I'm sure many of them are fine people, you know, I think that it's best to focus our conversations on the modes of change that are most effective in this society. And even in Mexico, the Zapatistas are not it. They're a holdout. Yes, Tito was not a good guy. Apodemos. You cannot replace everything with co-ops? Watch me. Why? Why not? Why can't every authoritarian business be made democratic? We can do it with every government. Now, if you have a business of like 2 men, like, okay, have the threshold be 10 people. Why not? 10 people. If you have more than 10 employees, you would have to abide by a set of rules concerning democratization. So then it's not a co-op. If it has like 2 people, then no. I'm not primarily interested in there being a cooperative of 2 people. I don't think the government's energy is spent best on that particular matter. You're asking for populist, not co-op. A worker co-op is a business where the business is owned collectively by its workers. It also implies democratic control. It'd be pretty silly for it to be owned collectively but have no democratic control. That'd be kind of a silly mix of incentives. That's a co-op. Technically, you can have a worker democracy that is not a cooperative. A good example of this might be a government industry. A government industry cannot be let's say, for example, a branch of the post office. The branch of the post office, it can't be a worker cooperative because the workers cannot collectively own it. It's owned by the United States government, as it should be. It's decommodified. But you can still have a worker democracy. You would ideally, however, still want it to be a worker cooperative, because if it's not a worker cooperative, you might just have a little member of the bourgeoisie in there. Hey, bucko. If the workers don't own that business, who does? Call them full-body partnerships to start? Sure, we can use whatever terminology we want. I just want the democracy. Yeah, there's zero reason as to why small companies couldn't also be cooperatives above a certain small number of employees. Doesn't Belgium mandate unions for companies over 20 employees? I don't really know. But that's good, though unions, of course, are different from workplace democracy. We could keep calling them corporations. They would still be corporations. A worker-controlled company or corporation is still a company or corporation. In order to make them not those things, you would have to decommodify, which is the next step towards socialism. And there's plenty of decommodification that needs to be done as well. Is that syndicalism? All corporations being worker co-ops? Syndicalism is when you're really into worker cooperatives, but you're spicy. Do you think the excess wealth from the exploitation helped us reach the standard of living? There is no excess wealth. That's the point of it being exploitation. That wealth wasn't created by the exploitation. It was just stripped from the workers. Without the exploitation, that wealth would still exist. It would just have been in the hands of the workers. And wealth is far more efficiently used when it's held by workers than it is when it's held by the wealthy. The wealthy just hoard their wealth. They just hoard big treasure troves of it. Working people actually spend their money, which invigorates the economy. Socialism does not just mean better welfare. Though under socialism, you'd better believe there will be better welfare. Though ideally, of course, people will be making a lot more from their jobs, so welfare won't be as much of a necessity. I would prefer decommodification of human necessities to welfare. Rather than giving people money, let them have good jobs, and if they can't work, make sure that food and housing are free. I think that'd be a better way of handling things, rather than treating it all as just capital being reinvested. I don't know if we can ever totally decommodify ex novo Q, but it's certainly the step towards there. Is hoarding wealth actually a problem economically? Yes, no, it's a massive problem. The Panama Papers and shit, there are literally like tens of trillions of dollars. Like, you think Elon Musk is the wealthiest man in the world. You don't know the name of the wealthiest man in the world, okay? Literally, like, the more money, like the GDP of the United States multiple times over is just sitting in boxes on an island, not literally in boxes, but it's just sitting on an island. That amount of money, if re-entered into the global economy, would usher in an era of prosperity, the likes of which you've never seen before. Like, I'm not joking. I know that sounds cartoonish, like it's a bunch of gold or water being brought back to poor or thirsty people, but like, it is literally, you know, it's not new extra money. This isn't an inflationary issue. That money was already printed. It's already been minted. It already exists. It already, quote unquote, circulates. But trillions, tens of trillions are just being held offshore. Illegally, away from taxation, just kept over there. It's just sitting there. You know why nothing is being done about it? Because the people who own that wealth own the politicians. That sounds like a juvenile statement, but it's literally true. Like, anyone who could hoard billions of dollars in an offshore account can keep politicians from looking into it. Obviously. Aki Demos, all you do is whine. Quit whining. It's weak. You're weak. It's not a cheap... If you think it's a cheap populist point to point out that the ultra-wealthy have hoarded an ungodly amount of money offshore where it's being kept illegally from taxation, from the people, if you think that's, like, cheap, no, it's quite a wealthy populist point, I'll have you know. You can call it whining if you want. I do, and your weakness disgusts me. Sorry, just reading on the Panama Papers. It's been a while. How much total money? How much total money held offshore? 4 trillion in U.S. wealth is stashed overseas, much of it in tax havens. So that's just U.S. money, right? Other countries contribute. Depending on who you look at, like, every article has its own. This is from Reuters, and this is from a decade ago. Super rich hold 32 trillion in offshore havens. Like, it's indescribable the amount of money this is. Like, the amount this represents. This is like the wealth of the earth is being stripped from the planet and is being hoarded in, like, a banking account somewhere offshore. Like, for no reason. US GDP is less than this. In today's money, it's 23.32 trillion. Back in 2012, when this article was written, our GDP was 16.25. So this is twice the US GDP. Not the US discretionary budget, the US GDP. Is there no way to stop wealth accumulation without taking other people's money? It's not their money, Bright Sea. It's our money. They took it by building rules and walls that benefited them. It's not theirs. It's ours. They're thieves. And we have to take it back. It's illegally held wealth. It wouldn't matter if it was legally held. They made the laws. Yeah. The top 1% of Americans have taken 50 trillion from the bottom 90%, and that's made the U.S. less secure. It's made it more secure for the wealthy. All right. I feel like we've sufficiently riled people up against the owning class. Very important. Could you give us a hypothetical situation where we retrieve that stolen wealth via bourgeois electoral politics? Tax law. What do you mean? I don't know what legal, like, strategies you would have to engage in to go after illegally held offshore wealth, but it's possible. It's always possible, right? For instance, the Panama Papers, all those documents that leaked, named hundreds of thousands of entities that store their wealth there. Arrest them and tell them to bring the money back. They put it there. It's illegal. They did a crime. If you run a red light, if you break the law, you can be arrested. Is it so ostentatious that they would also be held to that same standard? Didn't they assassinate the journalist behind the release of the Panama Papers? I think I remember that.